Good morning. Welcome to today's live with Tony Day, and I'm going to be your host this morning. And it's a pleasure to welcome Fee Hills, the co-founder of Mind Nudger AI. And as the title says, we're going to talk to you today and share some insights on how to build a learning culture and organization, or should I say, how to start that journey, because it is a journey to building a learning culture and organization. And as we know, all of our L&D people out there are facing some big challenges at the moment with the massive changes in technology, greater understanding in terms of how we learn and how we work. And over the course of the next 6 weeks, we're going to give a bit of a deep dive into all the different facets of building a learning organization and really transforming how you develop people and performance in this AI world. We're going to begin to pose a few questions. So how do we develop learning in the flow of work? How do we develop and scale learning for what is now a hybrid workforce? How do we ensure that we get the mindset and the behavioral shifts that are so often promised through a lot of development programs, but not often realized? How can we create micro bite-sized learning in this AI world and minimize the disruption that organizations and teams might face? How maybe can we foster more self-directed learning and encourage that kind of growth mindset within our people? How can we provide truly individualized learning experiences as opposed to the sheep dip that's often happened before? How can we track and measure things like ROI and the impact of our learning and the well-being of our people? Well, over these 6 weeks, we're going to give you some really good insights into how you can do all of those things, some of the approaches you can take and the steps to make. And this is going to require not only a shift in how we do things, but a shift in how we think about learning and how we develop our people and how we can harness the technology and AI to really transform how we do people development going forward. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the fabulous Fee Hills, and she's going to start this journey with you on how we can begin to build a culture of learning and become a true learning organization. So Fee, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony. And I'd like to start with John Hagel, because a lot of the work, as the seed of the work that we've done over the last sort of decade, I'm going to say, the favorite thought leader that we have in talking about building a learning culture, or really rather building an organization. Not just building a learning organization, but really being able to sustain that in the 21st century is John Hagel. And I feel that if you follow his work, he really tells us how to sort of create a scalable learning environment, which is part of that, creating a learning organization. So he has a quote, and it says, "Learning is the new form of labor. It's what we need to invest in, and it's what will drive personal and organizational growth in the future." Now, effectively, what this means is we have to change the way completely that we think about learning in order to be able to, what we call the 3 S's: speed, scale, and sustain. And if we can create these 3 things and align these things, then we sort of cracked it. Now, Julie has made a comment here. "Hi, will this be recorded?" Yes, all the LinkedIn lives are pretty much recorded afterwards, and you can just watch them back. No problem, Julie, if you're busy and have to go. No problem. Also, if there are a couple of slides we're going to be sharing, and if you want that, the slides, please let us know and just DM one of us and we'll get them to you. So housekeeping out the way. As Tony said, we are going to be doing this over 6 weeks, because building a learning culture is a process. It's not like today what we can achieve is give you what I'm sharing now, which is more or less like, this is what the ecosystem can look like that can create this learning culture, rather than information only based learning, which is pretty much great for explicit knowledge sharing and pretty much not very great for tacit knowledge sharing, which is where we're trying to get to. So if we want a learning culture, fundamentally, we've got to get to the point where all of our people are sharing tacit knowledge, that implicit knowledge that we have, that what they call bike riding stuff. You know, you can't tell it, you've got to get on the bike and ride it. And from here is where we get the new knowledge creation together. That's the ultimate learning culture. That's why we want it, really. And there's a lot involved in that. And I want to start with the method, because from the journey that we've been on as a team, what we know is that a lot of organizations, if you took COVID, immediately, understandably, everybody said, oh my God, in COVID, what are we going to do? We have to do training. So we now have to go virtual. So how are we going to do it? So what we did is took what could be sort of more traditional learning, which is understandable because we only had a few weeks to do it, and pretty much put that in a virtual environment. Usually it was Zoom. Okay. And so we did that. Now, clearly what was happening there is we threw technology at the problem. And one of the things that we know is that technology does not come first. The paradigm shift is created by the methodology changing. That's the paradigm shift. It's the technology, the process. And then actually, when that happens, in other words, when we get the right learner-centered methodology, which I'll explain in a second, and we get that right, then we can blend that into like a journey or micro-learning journey, and then we can put the technology to it. We can then scale that. So what happens is you might get the sort of, I can share information with thousands of people. That's, if you want to call that scalable, that is not what we call scalable learning. Okay, what we want to be able to do is draw everybody in to create that learning culture and then scale that. And that's a different scalable process. And that's why the method needs to go first. So today we're going to be talking about this landscape. And then in the forward next 5 weeks, we're going to be unraveling that of how we actually did what we did with Mind Nudger AI to build mind nudging journeys, pop-ups, and really dig in to bring these methodologies to life. So what do they look like in reality? So give you something, if you like, tacit to go away with step by step. So on that note, let's start with the methodology. And we call this learner-centered because it is, because we're going from trainer-centered as a methodology, where the trainer is the center of the experience. So you listen to me, I'm the expert. I mean, what we're doing now is quite trainer-centered, to be fair. And we're not saying that we don't need that. Of course, we need an element of that in learning. Of course we do. What's happening at the moment is that it's very, very heavy trainer-centered. So I would say 95+% of learning is really trainer-centered. And what we need to do is get that balance between learner-centered and trainer-centered. So learner-centered is where the learner is at the center of the experience. So that's what's around. So it's much more about facilitation, creating the environment, safe environment, psychologically safe learning space, and then putting the method in place that allows people to bring their own unique talents, experiences, their unique human complexities, because that's a long list, human complexities, as we all know, to that experience. And then that's where we get the new knowledge creation. So I hope that makes sense. I don't want to make this too complicated. We developed a methodology called EPIC, and the EPIC methodology itself is not new. And so we've had time to test this validate this on about 35,000 people over the years. And that method, it stands for experiential, playful, iterative, and collaborative. So all of those are quite explicit in themselves. Experiential learning is absolutely essential when we're talking about learner-centered in terms of putting the learner at the center of the experience. So what we're doing is facilitating either an activity or in appropriate times a game. Now I say this, that it sort of toggles between experiential and playful learning, meaning gamification in short. But playful is always experiential. Experiential is not always playful. and learning should not always be playful, because it depends on the environment, the audience, and the appropriateness of play being right at that time. And of course it's not. But experiential is always appropriate, especially when we're talking about behavior change, mindset change, human-centric skills. Tony, I bet you've got a lot to say on that. And then you've got the iterative, which is, we all know, we've been using that word for quite a while in business in general, agile, iterate, compound effect over time. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about continuous learning. Little, on demand, in real time if possible, and it iterates the process of development. And when you're talking about human-centric skills, you're really talking about compounding over time. So it's that effect. That is, oh no, sorry, I've missed out collaborative, probably one of the most important thing. So collaborative obviously is that element that you have to include in this process, social learning, or a social element to the learning. Why? Because we so desperately need new knowledge development and tacit knowledge sharing if you want to scale learning. So we can't do that. It'd be a lonely path if we tried to do that. Like if you had a mind nudging journey as an example, and the mind nudges are introspective, so there is that element that you need to do. You also need to be able to get people in a room and have an experiential, playful session where people, in a learner-centered way, can work their way through understanding things, developing skills, sharing learning, sharing their uniqueness. So at the end, we get the light bulbs, the enlightenment, and the change that we want in the way people think and ultimately in the way they behave. So it's not magic. We need these elements, and that's what we've proved. Now, when we put that method in first, it builds that solid foundation to build any type of culture. But in this case, we're talking about learning culture. And it puts that in place. And then we can move on to the process. So, Tony, any questions or anything like this before I move on to the second part, which is the process?
Yes, Sophie, that's really interesting. You mentioned there this has been kind of road tested on about 35,000 people over a number of years. Can you tell us a little bit more about that kind of journey that you've been on to get it to where we are now?
Yeah. So originally the methodology was born, I say the methodology, I'm talking about Epic now, for a product called Cafe Style Learning, Cafe Style Speed Training it was originally, which was bite-sized chunks of experiential learning and activities, and in some cases it was experiential, in some cases it was playful, like games. With groups of people. Obviously, originally that started off in person. And then in 2015, a team at the time, we were delivering to via Zoom 5 years before COVID. Can I just say that? And very successfully. Now, we didn't actually think that we were going to be able to take this experiential learning and these activities and games, of which we had about like 500 or whatever, and be able to run these in a virtual environment. But we had an opportunity with a very large global company who said, we want this delivered, but it has to be global, right? i.e. it has to be virtual, because you can't take them there for a 90-minute session or whatever it may be. And originally, Tony, as you know, because I know you from the call center market, originally all those decades ago, it's quite makes me feel so old. But basically, it was for call centers. So it's sort of frontline, customer experience, sales, very human-centric stuff. So it was born for that, but then it developed into behavior and cultural change over the years, what it was applied for. And I think most of the validation was really done with these sort of bigger companies in person. And then in 2015, we started to do it in Zoom. And then the rest is sort of history, because then COVID came and everyone went on Zoom. What was interesting is that it was I was a little bit sorrowful that I felt like people, I almost wanted to shout out, listen, guys, you can do this experientially, even in a Zoom environment, which was later found out a bit more because obviously things have progressed since COVID. So yeah, and what we found during this delivery all those years was the results were amazing in a short period of time. So this was across India and the UK and in other places, like there was some places in Europe, occasions in America. It wasn't rolled out in America, but occasions with America. But it was sort of very heavy UK and very heavy India throughout that time. And what we found is that what we were getting is for a, say, 2-hour session of a cafe style, say, you call them experiential workshops at the time, we would get what could be achieved in 2 days in a classroom of traditional information-based learning. So what we call this method is accelerated learning. It accelerates the process of transformation, ideal for mindset and behavior change, and therefore culture change. So we ended up doing, anyway, I'm drolling on online.
No, that was really useful. Thank you, Fee.
So having said so, with that method and being able to say, okay, tick, what that does, that method is accelerate the learning. What it doesn't do is scale the learning. Now, what we need to do now is scale the learning. So we ended up with a bit of a different problem saying, well, that's all very well, you can accelerate learning, but that's not going to solve the problem with 10,000 people in a company across different areas. It's just not going to address that. So what we also found about this experiential idea was that a lot of organizations used it as sort of events or at conferences and stuff like that to sort of cheer up the real learning. I just want to make that point, that a lot of it was saying, well, we can put this in and it'll just bring it to life a bit and make everybody happy. Actually, this is the one that accelerates the transformation. It is the learning, and it's understanding that learner-centered is allowing people to bring their own stuff to it. So more about that, because we need to get to the process. Also mindful we have a certain amount of time. I do get carried away with that method. So start with process. Methodology first, get that right. And of course that can be a mix. Of course it's going to be information as well, right? And like what we're doing now, which is information. And then the perfect blend. So the other question which we're going to be doing over the next 6 weeks is, so how do we get that perfect blend? Because I know what the blend looks like when I do a workshop with something after it. But what I don't necessarily know is, like I might put a video in or blend things in that way in a traditional sense. But how do I do it to create continuous learning is it's a different mindset that you go into design with, because you're thinking about how do I blend introspection with social learning? And where do I use the AI, for example? You'll see one down, that one here, that drops down from the perfect blend creation to the next stage of the process of how do we individualize the journey. So what do we mean by that? What we effectively mean is that the beauty of technology and where it comes in now is that we can embrace AI to understand where the individual is in their learning. Now we are going to have a separate class on this for the very reason that it needs it. It needs all of these component parts do actually need to be drilled down and take a deep dive into. So we are going to be doing that and sort of, understanding how we created it. So with the AI concept pyramid, what the AI is doing is being able to watch you through the journey. So say it's you, Tony, and you're going through the journey of, say, site safety. As a leader, you need to learn all these sort of concepts. And if you're missing any of these concepts, chances are you would not necessarily be successful at fostering a psychologically safe workspace, for example. So with the AI concept pyramid, it understands what good looks like, what concepts are required, and then it's understanding whether you understand them as you're going through that journey. And by doing that, it's only sending you the stuff the nudges or the learning, the learning stuff that you need, be it information or transformation, that you need at that point in time to make that. You can see a little pyramid here. If it's red, it means you don't understand the concept. You haven't got it yet. You haven't translated it or embodied it if it's a behavior. And if it goes green, happy days. So the goal here is very, very simple. It's using the AI tool to map a subject matter out, create the journey, and then it can start to individualize and send you what you need so that your unique pyramid goes green. That is a whole different game, because when we do that, we're not only saving time, we are ensuring that all our people with their complexities and strengths and weaknesses are able to align with what we need them to have. So if you took psych safety as being the foundation of a learning culture, and we know, well, our leaders must understand psych safety, but I'm getting some people really good at it. They have psychologically safe teams. I know you're very focused on team-based psychological safety and developing that. But then you might have a team over there that they do not create psychological safety. So we need to if you're going to scale learning and create a learning culture, then we need everyone to be aligned. That's not perfect, it's not perfect world, but we need them to be more aligned. So we need them to go through that individual journey, learn the concepts in whatever subject that may be. I mean, we're using the example of psych safety because that's the one that's live for us at the moment. We're living it, we're breathing it, we're creating it. The AI model's there for it. So that's why I'm using that as the example. So that's the process. So we've got method, we've got process, and then finally we've got journey. Tony, I see that some people have got Alan Carter. Hello, Alan. What are your thoughts about the best methods to capture organizational knowledge from divisional corporate entities in multiple geographic locations, and then to redisseminate, I think that says, sorry, I can't see it properly, and leverage that organizational knowledge back into those outposts, given the language and cultural differences? That is a cracker. That actually sounds to me like a whole session, as I think you're going to appreciate, Alan. But should we break that down a bit, Tony, or shall I finish this last bit of journey and then break it down?
Yeah, I'd finished the last little bit of the journey. I was just going to ask you, Fee, because you've highlighted something really interesting there, that individualized piece, because someone who's been in the learning space for a long time, it's always been a real challenge looking at how you can genuinely individualize learning. So can you just tell us a little bit more about how that works? What goes on there? How does that happen? Because that sounds pretty interesting.
Say that last bit again.
How does it actually work? Tell me a little bit more about how the mind nudger individualizes a journey, because I can see that would be really interesting for a lot of our audience.
Okay. Yeah. So as I said, this is, and as you know, Tony, is going to take its own wee little session on LinkedIn Lives. So the AI effectively, I'm going to take site safety because we've got something real to hang a hat on, right? You could be talking growth mindset. You could be talking anything. In each subject, it's broken down to what's called concepts. So the mind works in concepts, and this model is from Mike Hassani, of course, who's been in AI since goodness knows, I think it's 40 years, bless him, and neuroscience and AI, and he's had this model. And then because of his brilliance in AI and all his team that does that, he's developing these sort of AI concept pyramids that we then build up with researching. Okay, so we know what the categories of site safety are. Lots of people have got different frameworks, and we could argue that framework is different to that framework. I always say it doesn't really matter, because the important thing is to cover the concepts that you need to understand and embrace and embody as a leader to foster in reality site safety. So that's the gig, right? Now, if you're sorry, Tony.
No, that's really interesting. So how does it know to do that? So you mentioned sort of nano nudges. Tell me how that kind of works.
You see, yeah, it's a little the little, what do you call him, genie in the background going, I
Mm.
know what you're thinking. So once we've built the AI model and that model's in place for psychological safety, a lot of these concepts, by the way, cross over into other human-centric skills, not surprisingly. So once we've done that, the AI's machine learning is learning over time, so it needs the data to it learns these concepts. We teach it those concepts effectively. When people go through the psych safety mind nudging journey, which might be sort of 12 weeks in total, no panic, it's only 30 minutes a week, and on the go sort of thing, it's as you're going through, it's got something called nano nudging in. And nano nudging is effectively tiny bits of assessment. So it's assessing you against that pyramid, but you're not even noticing because it's only like, it's iterative. It's as you go. It's not like you're going to do an assessment, that sort of linear fashion. It's integrated into the whole experience. So you're actually answering that. It starts to build up a picture of you very quickly because it's learned what good looks like for site safety, right? So this is where the AI comes in. And this is where it can help individualize the journey. Now, when you individualize that journey, what you're doing is you're helping the scalable effect to take light because you're aligning everyone. So this is where method and things overtakes just mere technology. You can have a platform, which we've got, but that you need the AI with it to individualize the journey. It's not a case of just sending information. You get what I mean? So it's nudging you.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Thank you, Fee. I'll allow you to finish on your last section.
Last section. Are we going to go over time here? We're so going to go over time. Can we go over time 5 to 10 minutes? We don't mind if you don't mind. Can we?
1 minute, 2 minutes.
Okay. So journeys are is a process. Again, we look at process, but in a different way. So if you looked at, I just want to take culture change, and you go, right, this actually, I'm not sure if this helps here, but it might, Alan, in even starting to address, because obviously it all comes together to create what you're talking about there. You looked at the process underneath along the grid, and you had the first thing you do with cultural change is, if I want to change culture, the first thing I have to do somehow is ignite everybody's interest. I have to engage people into it. So you join me on the journey. Yay, whoa, 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 whoa. But, you know, there's actually, companies are really good at that, but then it dies a death. So I always find like companies generally, whether they have a communication plan or something like that, or a big party or whatever it is, igniting does not seem to be the problem in cultural change. It's the next bit, which is, how do I embed? So let's say, for example, you had a set of values and you said, right, I'm going to use these values or ethics to actually develop my new culture, whatever that culture may be, right? And I'm going to use these as a type of framework. So I'm going to ignite this. I'm going to have a communication plan, and I'm going to have a learning plan and some master classes and workshops and all the rest of it. But then what I do is I tell everyone about it. So it's information heavy rather than transformational heavy. So what we need to do to bring people on the journey is immerse them in the journey. That's where the method comes in. So you're almost like experiential, where they bring the ideas to it. It's once you set the framework, it's them that's going to change, not us that imposes the chain upon them. So this is where ignite is important, the way things are ignited. We have something called pop-up learningscapes that we designed to deal with this, to ignite change, if you like, and reignite change, because that needs to happen, of course. It's continuous learning. So embed is a completely different thing. So the way I embed a behavior and cultural change is not the same as how I ignite it. And it's, in a way, a lot more trickier, but not if you do it right. So again, this is where iteration comes in and habit change. So what I'm after there really is, how do I change habits? And I have to do that iteratively. So first of all, to embed, I do need to have this element of introspection, because I need to get inside people's heads. So that's where the mind nudging actually comes in. It's introspection. But yes, that's great for embedding. And over time, it's like one big cognitive reframing machine. And we need to do that to reframe people's thinking in a gentle, nice, positive way. Because If somebody is thinking of a negative frame, we want them to transform to a more helpful and useful frame for their sake, as much as the organization's sake. So if we think about cognitive restructuring, that's where it's at. It's cognitive behavior therapy, really, but it's done on a large scale. So also, let's not forget, when we use the AI and when we use the technology, what we can do is measure this entire thing. So if we can't measure cultural change right now, we're not going to get it, because it's lost in the ether so quickly and everything changes so quickly. So that iterative process requires that we have very strong analytics, which requires AI. So anyway, I digress. We needed more than half an hour for all this. It was only one slide, but look. So grow is where, once I've embedded this change, I can then grow. So this is our development bit. This is the bit where we put the juicy stuff on top. This is the bit where we develop creative thinking, innovation, blah, blah, blah. And again, that's slightly different because grow is a blend of introspection, social learning. We've got the shared thinking pods, social learning, that sort of thing. So where this blend always goes back to needing the right method, the right blend, and individualization to scale learning. Or when I say learning, I actually mean cultural change as well. So, and the last bit, of course, is sustain, and then you just go around again. That's why it's a circle. Well, it's not a very good circle. Sort of shaped like a circle. So what we do know about all this stuff is when we get this right, what we absolutely know for sure is that we can then scale learning, we can accelerate it and tick, we can scale it and we can sustain it. And that is has been our goal in the last 4 years to develop My Nudger AI. So on that note, we've gone 1.2 minutes over, which is terrible.
Done well.
I think yeah. I love what you're talking about. And I think I'd like to take these comments because we've run out of time. And what I'd like to do is maybe think about doing a session where we address these things you're talking about, because what she was talking about is brilliant. So, and we need to be talking about it. He's actually put another, if you don't mind me just sharing this. I think we incorporate several different types of AI, such as narrow AI, ML, generative AI, and NLP, and maybe cognitive computing. Just interested in your thoughts, but I may put out an article perhaps to help others think about AI journey. 100%. And get in touch, because maybe what we can do is have you on a session, on a live, on a separate live, and be talking about this stuff, because you sound like you have a deep understanding of this, and that to me is really helpful. We're very specific on our AI concept pyramids. We do use 11 different types of AI in My Nudger AI, of which I'm not an expert in the whole entire thing on that side. But I will say what you're talking about here, needs to be heard. So although you write an article, let's get in touch and let's share our knowledge, because this is very important that we share this knowledge. So Tony, over to you, and thank you everyone for listening.
No, thank you, Fee. That's been really insightful, and I hope our audience have had some good takeaways there. As you mentioned, there's a lot involved in this, and over the course of the next 6 weeks, we will begin to deeper dive into some of these areas and answer some of those questions that we posed at the very beginning. I think if I was going to pick one thing out there for me today, I think it's that individualized piece. I think that could be really interesting for our L&D world, because there's been so many challenges around this whole notion of sheep dipping into individualized. And I think it's a really, really interesting piece. So I'm looking forward to kind of learning a bit more about that and what that can really mean for organizations going forward. But we are over time. Thank you so much, Fee. It's been a real pleasure to hear some of your thoughts on this journey towards a learning culture and organization. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with you over the course of the next few weeks. So, yeah, well done.
And thank you, everybody, for either listening on the recording or being here live. Thank you, and have a lovely week. And thank you, Tony, for hosting that.
My pleasure, Fee.
Thank you.